The signal came at midnight Galactic Standard Time. It traveled across empty space for 3 days before reaching the quiet listener, a small monitoring station at the edge of known space. The station belonged to the Galactic Union, and its purpose was simple. It listened for voices in the dark. Liaison was on duty when the signal arrived. Was small, covered in soft blue feathers with large black eyes that could see in almost total darkness. The species was known for their gentle nature. They had never fought a war. They had never needed to. The galaxy was mostly peaceful, and those who were not peaceful were avoided. But this signal changed everything. Played the message on the main screen. The voice that came through was broken and desperate. It spoke in the universal trade language, but the words were filled with terror. This is we are under attack. The Dominion has come. They are burning our cities. They are killing our children. Please, someone, anyone, help us. The message repeated, again and again, a loop of horror that would not stop. Immediately sent the signal to Galactic Union Command. The response came within the hour. It was not what it hoped for. The Dominion is too powerful. Intervention would mean total war. The Galactic Union offers its deepest sympathy to the people. Sympathy, that was all they would give. Words without action, thoughts without help. Stared at the response for a long time. They were a peaceful species, much like they had never harmed anyone. Their cities were made of living crystal, beautiful beyond description. And now those cities were burning. But then remembered something. There was another option, a dangerous option, an option that most species preferred not to think about. Earth. The humans had joined the Galactic Union only 50 years ago. They were strange creatures from a world that should not have produced intelligent life. Earth was a death world. The gravity was too strong. The weather was too violent. The predators were too many. And yet, somehow, humans had survived. More than survived. They had thrived. Most species avoided humans. They were too loud, too aggressive, too willing to fight. But they had also made a promise when they joined the Union. They promised to answer any call for help, any call at all. Forwarded the signal to Earth Command. The response came in less than 10 minutes. Admiral Ho sat in his command chair aboard the Iron Will, reading the distress signal. He was a tall man with gray hair and calm eyes. He had fought in 3 wars before humanity reached the stars. He knew what suffering looked like. He knew what it meant when good people did nothing. "How long until they are gone?" he asked. Captain Park Somi checked her screens. She was younger than the Admiral, with sharp features and a mind that worked faster than most computers. Based on the attack patterns, they have 6 hours, maybe less. And our fleet? The 7th Emergency Response Fleet is ready, sir. 12 heavy cruisers, 30 destroyers, 200 fighter craft, and the flagship Iron Will. Admiral nodded slowly. It was not a small fleet, but the Dominion was vast. They had conquered 20 species. They had never lost a war. "That will not be enough," said a nervous voice from the side of the bridge. Admiral turned to look at Liaison. The small alien had been assigned to observe human military operations. Most days, there was nothing to observe. Humans spent more time training than fighting. "What do you suggest?" Admiral asked. Trembled. "The Galactic Union has decided not to intervene. Perhaps you should." "I was not asking for permission," Admiral said quietly. "I was asking what you think we need." "Did not understand. You are going to fight, even though you might lose, even though your people might die." Admiral stood up from his chair. He walked to the main window and looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, innocent people were dying. Somewhere out there, children were screaming for help that would not come. "Contact Earth Command," he said. "Tell them to activate Protocol Omega." Captain Park Somi's eyes widened. "Sir, Protocol Omega means—" "I know what it means." Looked between the 2 humans. "What is Protocol Omega?" Captain Park Somi's voice was barely a whisper. Total annihilation fleet. The next hour was chaos. Ships that did not know existed began appearing from hidden bases across human space. They were massive vessels, black as the void between stars. They carried weapons that could not identify and crews that showed no fear. Watched the fleet assemble and felt something cold settle in their stomach. This was not a rescue force. This was an extinction event waiting to happen. "Why do you have such ships?" asked Admiral. "The galaxy is at peace." Admiral did not look away from the gathering armada. Humans learned a long time ago that peace is not a gift. It is something you must protect, and sometimes, to protect the innocent, you must become something terrible. The fleet was ready. 50 warships now, with more on the way. Admiral gave the order, and reality itself seemed to bend as the ships entered hyperspace. Stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, watching the strange colors of faster-than-light travel swirl outside the windows. The journey would take only 2 hours. 2 hours, and then they would face the Dominion. "I must ask," said softly, "why are you doing this? They are strangers, they have nothing to offer you, they cannot repay you. Why risk your lives for them?" Admiral turned to face the small alien. His eyes were old and tired, but there was something burning deep within them, something that did not recognize. "Because they asked for help," Admiral said, "and no one else answered." The fleet burst out of hyperspace exactly 2 hours later. What they found made even the hardened human warriors pause. There was burning. Great columns of fire rose from the crystal cities. Warships filled the sky, thousands of them, raining death upon a world that had never known war. Captain Park Somi's voice was steady, but her hands were shaking. "Fleet detected. Over 3,000 vessels. They outnumber us 60 to 1. Admiral looked at the burning world below. He thought of the children crying for help. He thought of the promise humanity had made. "All ships," he said calmly, "weapons hot. We are not here to negotiate. We are not here to observe. We are here to end this." The Iron Will moved forward, and behind it, the total annihilation fleet followed. They had never faced humans in battle. They did not know what was coming. They were about to learn. The Supreme Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching his fleet burn the crystal world below. His name was, and he had conquered 12 worlds before this one. They were the weakest species he had ever encountered. They had no weapons, no warriors, no will to fight. This was not a conquest. It was extermination. Then his sensors screamed a warning. "Unidentified ships emerging from hyperspace," his tactical officer reported. 50 vessels, they bear the markings of Earth. Laughed. He had heard stories about the humans. They were newcomers to the galaxy, primitive creatures from a violent world. They had barely mastered space travel. What could 50 ships do against 3,000? "Open a channel," he ordered. "Let us speak to these fools." The face that appeared on his screen was calm. Too calm. It belonged to an older human male with gray hair and steady eyes. "I am Supreme Commander of the Dominion," announced. "You are interfering in matters that do not concern you. Leave now, or your ships will be destroyed." The human did not flinch. "I am Admiral Ho of Earth. You are attacking innocent people who asked for help. Leave now, or your ships will be destroyed." Stared at the screen. No one had ever spoken to him this way. No species in the galaxy dared challenge the Dominion. He burst into harsh laughter. "You threaten me, with 50 ships. I have 3,000 warships, human, you are nothing." Admiral's expression did not change. "Then you have nothing to worry about." The channel closed. Was still laughing when the first missiles hit his fleet. Commander Shin Haina stood at the weapons console of the Iron Will, her fingers dancing across the controls. She was the best weapons officer in the human fleet, and today she would prove it. "First wave launched," she reported. "Kinetic rounds and adaptive missiles." The human weapons were unlike anything they had seen. The kinetic rounds were simple chunks of metal, accelerated to impossible speeds. They did not care about shields. They did not care about armor. They simply punched through everything in their path. The adaptive missiles were worse. They were smart weapons that learned from each failure. When a ship blocked one, the next missile changed its approach. When shields stopped them, they found ways around. They were relentless. The first 100 ships died in seconds. Stopped laughing. Return fire, he screamed. Destroy them. The fleet opened up with everything they had. Energy beams, plasma bombs, nuclear warheads. The space between the fleets became a wall of fire. But the human ships did not slow down. They took hits that should have destroyed them. Their shields flickered and failed, but their hulls held, and they kept coming. Lieutenant One was already in his fighter, leading a squadron of 20 craft into the chaos. He was young, barely 25, with quick reflexes and no fear of death. "All fighters follow my lead," he said through the radio. "Target their command ships, hit them hard and fast." His squadron dove into the battle. Fighters rose to meet them, hundreds against 20. The odds were impossible. One smiled. Human pilots flew differently than any other species. They pushed their ships beyond all limits. They performed maneuvers that should have killed them. They endured forces that should have crushed their bodies. And they never, ever gave up. One's fighter took a direct hit. Warning lights filled his cockpit. Half his systems were dead. Any sane pilot would retreat. He kept flying. His missiles found a carrier. The explosion was beautiful, a flower of fire blooming in the void. Around him, his squadron was doing the same, trading their lives for enemy ships. For every human fighter lost, 10 vessels burned. On the Iron Will, Captain Park Somi watched the battle unfold. The numbers were still against them. They were still going to lose eventually, but they were making the pay for every meter of space. "Admiral," she said, "we are taking heavy losses. They are adapting to our weapons." Admiral nodded. He had expected this. "And our reinforcements?" "Still 30 minutes away." "Then we hold for 30 minutes." Watched his fleet die and could not understand what was happening. His ships were more numerous. His weapons were more powerful. His warriors were the terror of the galaxy. Yet these humans fought like nothing he had ever seen. They did not retreat when wounded. They did not surrender when surrounded. They flew their damaged ships directly into vessels, turning their deaths into weapons. It was madness. "What are these creatures?" he demanded. His science officer was trembling. "They are from Earth, Supreme Commander, a death world. Their planet has extreme gravity, dangerous weather, and countless predators. They evolved to survive the impossible." "But they are dying. Can they not see they are dying?" "They see, Supreme Commander. They simply do not care." Felt something he had never felt before: fear. Liaison stood on the bridge of the Iron Will, watching the battle in silence. The small alien had never seen violence like this. The species settled disputes with songs and dances. They could not imagine choosing death over retreat. But the humans did not see it as a choice. To them, there was only one option: fight until the innocent were safe. Fight until the enemy stopped. Fight until your heart stopped beating. Commander Shin Haina's console exploded. She was thrown across the bridge, her arm burned and broken. Without a word, she climbed back to her station, using her one good hand to keep firing. Watched her and finally understood. Humans were not crazy. They were not savage. They simply loved more fiercely than any other species. They loved so much that they would die for strangers. They would burn for people they had never met. It was terrifying, and it was beautiful. The battle raged for 28 more minutes. The human fleet was torn apart, ship by ship. The Iron Will was burning. Half its crew was dead. Admiral had taken a piece of metal in his leg and refused to leave the bridge. But they held. And then the sky filled with new stars. "Reinforcements arriving," Captain Park Somi announced, her voice breaking with relief. 150 additional ships. The full total Annihilation fleet is now present. The fresh human ships burst into the battle without pausing. They hit the fleet from every direction, overwhelming their defenses with pure aggression. Watched his command display turn red as ship after ship was destroyed. The humans were not trying to defeat him. They were trying to erase him. "Fall back," he ordered. "All ships fall back." But there was no falling back. The humans had surrounded them, and below, on the burning planet, something else was happening. Saw them on the sensors. Human, dozens of them, descending through the fire and smoke. They were heading for the surface, for the cities where civilians were still dying. "They are landing troops," whispered. "Even now, in the middle of battle, they are trying to save people on the ground." Admiral looked at the small alien. Blood was running down his face and his voice was tired, but his eyes were still burning. "That is why we came," he said. "Not for victory for them." Below, the first human boots hit the ground of a world that was not their own. They had come to save strangers, and they would not stop until it was done. The crystal city of Prime had been beautiful once. Its towers reached toward the sky like frozen music, catching the light of their twin suns and scattering rainbows across the streets. They had spent 10,000 years building their home, growing the living crystal with patience and love. Now it was burning. Sergeant Major Young was the first human to touch the ground. He stepped out into a landscape of fire and shadow. The air was thick with smoke. The sound of weapons fire echoed from every direction, and somewhere close by, civilians were screaming. "Spread out," he ordered his troops. "Find survivors, protect them at all costs." His squad moved through the ruins like ghosts. They were trained for environments far worse than this. Earth had taught them to survive in jungles full of predators, deserts that could kill in hours, and oceans that swallowed ships whole. This broken city was nothing compared to their home. Young found the first group of soldiers near a collapsed building. They were pulling civilians from the rubble, but not to save them. They were executing them one by one, laughing as the crystal beings shattered into pieces. Young did not hesitate. His weapon spoke 3 times. 3 soldiers fell. The others turned, raising their guns, but they were too slow. Humans had evolved as pursuit predators. Their reflexes were sharpened by millions of years of hunting and being hunted. The remaining died before they could fire a single shot. The civilians stared at Young in confusion. They had never seen a human before. He was tall and strange, with soft skin and small eyes. He looked fragile compared to the armored warriors. But he had just killed 6 soldiers in 2 seconds. "You are safe now," Young said slowly, knowing they might not understand his words. "We are here to help." One of a child no larger than a human hand, slowly approached him. Its crystal body was cracked and dim. It looked up at Young with eyes that held 1,000 questions. Young knelt down to its level. He removed his helmet so the child could see his face. He tried to smile, though his heart was breaking at the destruction around them. "It is okay," he said softly. "We came for you." In another part of the city, Medic Private was doing the impossible. She had found a shelter full of wounded, dozens of them, their crystal bodies cracked and leaking the silver fluid that was their blood. She had no idea how to treat them. Human medicine did not apply to beings made of living stone, but refused to let them die. She watched how they moved. She listened to the sounds they made when they were in pain. She noticed that their silver blood hardened when exposed to certain frequencies of light, so she improvised. Using her flashlight and some medical tape, she created a way to seal their wounds. It was not perfect. It was not scientific, but it worked. "You are very strange," one of the wounded said. It was an elder, ancient and wise, with cracks running across its entire body. Its name was Elder, and it had seen 10,000 years of peace. Until today. "Why do you help us?" the elder asked. "Your ships fight in the sky, your soldiers die in our streets. Why do you sacrifice so much for strangers?" Paused in her work, she thought about the question carefully. "Because you needed help," she said finally, "and we could give it. But you gain nothing. We have no wealth, we have no weapons, we cannot repay you." Smiled, though her eyes were wet with tears. "We do not help people because we want something back. We help because it is right, because leaving you to die would make us something we do not want to be." The elder was silent for a long time. It did not understand this logic. No species in the galaxy thought this way. Power was for taking. Strength was for conquering. That was the law of the universe. But these humans from their deadly world had broken that law. They had looked at the screaming void and decided to fill it with kindness. Outside, the battle continued. Sergeant Major Young led his squad deeper into the city, fighting soldiers at every corner. His people took wounds that would have killed other species. They kept fighting anyway. Private Oh Sung-ho took a plasma bolt to the chest. It should have killed him. He stood back up, armor smoking, and kept shooting. Private Mi-sun lost her left arm to an explosion. She switched her rifle to her right hand and continued the mission. Corporal Nam Ha carried 2 wounded on his back through a kilometer of enemy fire. He was hit 7 times. He never stopped moving. They could not understand what they were fighting. These humans should have been easy prey. They were soft and small, with no natural weapons, no scales, no claws, but they absorbed damage like they did not feel pain. They fought with a fury that bordered on madness, and they protected thee as if those crystal strangers were their own children. Sergeant Major Young found Elder in the shelter with Medic. The old was fatting, its cracks spreading despite its efforts. "You must rest," was saying. "Please let me help you." "There is no help for me," the elder replied. "I am too old, too broken, but I needed to see you one more time. I needed to understand." Young knelt beside the dying elder. His armor was covered in blood, some of it his own. His hands were shaking from exhaustion, but his eyes were clear. "What do you need to understand?" he asked. "Why you came, why you fight, why you die for us." Young was quiet for a moment. Outside he could hear explosions. His people were still fighting, still dying, still refusing to give up. "On our world," he said finally, "there was a time when evil men came to power. They hurt innocent people. They burned cities. They killed children. And the rest of the galaxy, the rest of our own species, did nothing. They watched. They made excuses. They looked away." The elder listened. Its fatting light focused entirely on the human. Millions died because good people did nothing. And when it was over, when the evil was finally defeated, we made a promise. Never again. Never again would we stand by while innocence burned. Never again would we choose safety over justice, even if it meant our own destruction. Elder reached out with a cracked hand and touched Young's face. The contact was gentle, almost like a blessing. "You are the strangest creatures in the universe," the elder whispered. "You are monsters who chose to be saints, destroyers who chose to be protectors. I have lived 10,000 years, and I have never seen anything like you." The light in the elder's body was fading fast now, but there was something in its eyes that looked almost like hope. "Promise me," it said. "Promise me you will save my people." Sergeant Major Young placed his hand over the elder's. "I promise." Elder smiled, and then the light went out forever. Medic was crying. Even Young felt his eyes burning, but there was no time for grief. The battle was not over. "All units," Young said into his radio, "the ground is ours. Begin evacuation of all civilian shelters, and protect them with your lives." Above in space, the human fleet was still fighting, but on the ground the tide had turned. They were retreating, overwhelmed by an enemy that simply refused to stop. And then the sensors detected something new, something terrible. A ship the size of a moon was emerging from hyperspace. They had called for their ultimate weapon. The world killer was beautiful in the way that nightmares were beautiful. It was a sphere of black metal, larger than most moons, covered in weapon systems that could burn entire continents. At its center was a core of compressed dark matter, capable of shattering a planet's heart with a single shot. They had used it 3 times before. 3 worlds were now asteroid fields. 3 species existed only in memory. Admiral Ho watched the massive ship emerge from hyperspace, and for the first time in his long career, he felt despair. "That thing can destroy the planet in one shot," Captain Park Somi said quietly. "Our weapons cannot penetrate its shields. Our fleet cannot stop it in time." The bridge was silent. Everyone knew what she was saying. They had fought so hard. They had lost so many. And it was all about to be for nothing. His face appeared on the main screen. The Supreme Commander was smiling now, his fear replaced by cruel victory. "Humans," he said, "you have impressed me. No species has ever hurt my fleet so badly. But it ends now. Surrender and I will make your deaths quick. Resist and I will destroy this planet, your fleet, and then I will visit your Earth. I will show your people what happens when insects challenge gods." Admiral said nothing. His mind was racing, searching for options that did not exist. But Captain Park Somi was thinking too, and she found something. "Admiral," she said, her voice careful, "the World Killer's main weapon requires a charging period. During that time, the weapon port is open and unshielded. If we could get a ship inside that port before it fires." "It would need to carry an antimatter core," Admiral said slowly, "and detonate it from within." "Yes, sir." The bridge went even more silent. Everyone understood what she was proposing. It was a suicide mission. Whoever flew that ship would not be coming back. Admiral closed his eyes. He had sent soldiers to die before. Every commander did. But this was different. This was asking someone to fly directly into the heart of death with no chance of survival. He could not order this. He would not order this. "I will go," said a voice from the engineering station. Chief Engineer Dongjun stepped forward. He was an older man, quiet and thoughtful, with hands that had built some of the most advanced systems in the human fleet. He had a wife on Earth, a daughter who was expecting her first child, a life that was worth living. But he was also a man who understood what was at stake. "I have calculated the timing," he said calmly. "The antimatter core from a standard assault craft will be sufficient. The weapon port opens 60 seconds before firing. I can reach it in 45 seconds if I start at maximum velocity. That gives me 15 seconds to breach the port and trigger the detonation." "Dongjun," Admiral said softly, "I cannot ask you to do this." "You are not asking, sir. I am volunteering." Captain Park Somi's eyes were wet. "There must be another way. We can find another solution." "There is no time, Captain. The World Killer is already charging. We have less than 10 minutes. The bridge crew looked at each other. They all knew Dongjun was right, and one by one other voices spoke up. "I will go instead," said a young pilot. "No, send me," said a weapons officer. "I have no family," said another. "Let it be me." Within seconds, half the bridge had volunteered to die. Admiral looked at his crew, at these humans who were willing to end their lives for strangers on a world they had never seen before today, and he felt his heart break with pride. "Enough," he said, his voice thick. "Dongjun spoke first, it will be him." Dongjun nodded. He removed his personal communicator and handed it to Captain Park Somi. "Please give this to my wife. Tell her I love her. Tell my daughter to name the baby after her grandmother." Somi took the communicator with shaking hands. "I will, I promise." Dongjun turned and walked off the bridge. He did not look back. The assault craft was small and fast, designed for hit-and-run attacks. Dongjun modified it quickly, connecting the antimatter core to a manual trigger. He tested the systems 3 times, making sure everything was perfect. He thought about his wife, about the way she laughed at his bad jokes, about the warmth of her hand in his. He thought about his daughter, about how proud he was of the woman she had become, about the grandchild he would never meet. He thought about Earth, about blue oceans and green forests, about the small house where he grew up, about the sound of rain on the roof. And then he launched into the darkness. The human fleet was still fighting, drawing every ship toward them, away from the small craft speeding toward the world killer. Liaison watched from the iron wheel and could not understand what was happening. "He is going to die," said. "He knows he is going to die. Why does he not stop?" Admiral did not take his eyes off the main screen, where Dongjun's ship was a tiny dot moving toward the massive sphere of death. Because if he stops, millions of innocent people die instead. He is trading one life for millions. It is the simplest math in the universe. But it is his life, his only life. Yes, and he has decided what that life is worth. His feathers were shaking. The species valued individual survival above all else. They could not imagine choosing death. But these humans did it without hesitation, as if their lives were currency to be spent on something greater. The world killer's weapon port began to open. A glow of terrible energy appeared at its center, growing brighter with each second. Dongjun's voice came through the radio, calm and steady. "Approaching target, 40 seconds to impact." Saw the small ship and understood too late. "Stop that craft," he screamed. "Destroy it now." Weapons turned toward Dongjun. The space around him became a wall of fire. His ship was hit once, twice, 10 times. Warning systems screamed. Shields failed. Hull breaches spread. He kept flying. 20 seconds to impact. Admiral's hands were gripping his chair so hard that his knuckles were white. Everyone on the bridge had stopped breathing. "Dongjun," he said quietly, "you are the bravest man I have ever known." Dongjun laughed. It was a gentle sound without fear or regret. "I am just a man who loves his family, Admiral, and this is how I protect them. This is how I protect everyone." His ship was barely holding together now. Smoke filled the cockpit. His left arm was burned, useless, but his right hand was on the trigger and his eyes were fixed on the glowing weapon port ahead. 10 seconds. Tell Earth I am proud to be human." The assault craft entered the world killer's weapon port, threading through a gap that should have been impossible to navigate. For one perfect moment, Dongjun saw the heart of the machine, the dark matter core that could destroy worlds. He closed his eyes and thought of his wife's smile. "Goodbye," he whispered. He pressed the trigger. The antimatter core detonated. For an instant, a new star was born inside the world killer. The energy was beyond comprehension, a force that tore through the massive ship like paper. The dark matter core lost containment. Reality itself seemed to scream. The world killer exploded. On the iron will, the flash was so bright that the screens went dark. When they came back online, the space where the moon-sized weapon had been was empty except for expanding debris. Admiral stood slowly. His face was wet with tears he had not noticed falling. "Broadcast to all vessels," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Your weapon is gone. Your commander is trapped. You have one chance to surrender. Take it or join your world killer." The fleet froze. Their supreme weapon, the fear of the galaxy, had been destroyed by one small ship and one brave man. And behind the human fleet, more ships were arriving, fresh reinforcements, hungry for battle. Looked at his tactical display and knew that he had lost, not just this battle, everything. The humans had answered an SOS with total annihilation, and now they were going to finish what they started. The fleet was dying. What had begun as 3,000 warships was now less than 800, and that number was falling by the minute. Human reinforcements poured into the system like a river of fire, surrounding the invaders from every direction. Supreme Commander stood on his ruined bridge, watching his empire crumble. Half his command crew was dead. His flagship was burning, and somewhere in the chaos, Admiral Ho was hunting him. All ships focus fire on the human flagship, ordered desperately. Kill their leader and they will fall apart. But the humans did not fall apart. When one ship was destroyed, another took its place. When one captain died, another stepped up to command. They were not an army of individuals. They were a single creature with 1,000 bodies and one unbreakable will. Admiral watched the battle from the iron will, which was barely holding together. The ship had taken more damage than any vessel should survive. Its engines were failing. Its shields were gone. Its weapons were running low on power. But it was still fighting. Admiral Captain Park Somi reported, "We have the flagship in range. Their shields are down. We can end this." Looked at the enemy vessel on his screen. Inside that ship was the commander who had ordered the massacre of innocent people. The man who had laughed while children burned. Justice demanded his death. But Admiral was tired of death. "Open a channel," he said. "One final offer." His face appeared on the screen. The Supreme Commander looked broken, his armor cracked, his scales burned. He was no longer the proud conqueror who had mocked the humans hours ago. "What do you want?" asked. His voice was empty. "Surrender," Admiral said simply. "Order your remaining ships to stand down. Accept full responsibility for your crimes, and we will let your people live. Live as prisoners. Live as people who get another chance. Your soldiers were following orders. Your civilians did not choose this war. I will not punish them for your madness." Laughed bitterly. "You would show mercy after everything we have done, after we tried to destroy your world." "Yes. Why, we would not do the same for you. No species in the galaxy would." Admiral leaned forward, his old eyes burning with something that could not understand. "That is exactly why we must. Because if we become like our enemies, then what are we fighting for?" The bridge was silent. Every human, every who could hear this transmission was frozen, waiting. Closed his eyes. He thought about his fleet, his people, his empire. He thought about pride and power and all the things he had believed in, and he realized that none of it mattered anymore. "I surrender," he said quietly. "All forces stand down, the war is over." The response was immediate. Across the system, weapons went silent. Ships that had been fighting desperately moments ago began transmitting surrender signals. The battle ended not with a final explosion, but with an exhausted sigh. Admiral fell back into his chair. His body was screaming with pain, but his heart was finally at peace. "Captain Park," he said, "begin rescue operations. Save everyone you can and alike." Somi nodded, tears running down her face. "Yes, Admiral, it would be my honor." On the surface of the Sergeant Major Young looked up at the sky. The fires were going out. The explosions had stopped. The night that had seemed endless was finally giving way to dawn. Medic emerged from the shelter, exhausted beyond words. She had saved 37 that night, learning their biology through trial and error, refusing to let any of them die. Her hands were covered in silver blood. Her eyes were red from crying. But she was smiling. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually did it." Young put his arm around her shoulders. Around them, human soldiers were helping civilians emerge from hiding. The crystal beings looked at their destroyed cities with grief, but also with hope. They were still alive. Their species would continue. And they owed it all to strangers from a death world who had answered their call. A young child approached Young. It was the same one he had saved early in the battle, its cracks now sealed with the makeshift bandages had invented. The child held something in its hands, a small crystal that glowed with inner light. "For you," the child said in broken trade language. "Gift, thank you for saving us." Young knelt down and accepted the crystal. It was warm in his hands, pulsing with a gentle heartbeat. "What is it?" he asked. "Memory," the child said. "My family's memory, 10,000 years of songs and stories. I want you to have it, so you never forget us. so we never forget you." Young's throat was too tight to speak. He simply nodded and held the crystal close to his heart. Liaison found Admiral in the medical bay of the Iron Will. The Admiral was finally allowing doctors to treat his wounds, though he complained about every minute away from the bridge. "I must file my report to the Galactic Union," said. "They will want to know what happened here." "And what will you tell them?" Was silent for a long moment. The small alien had seen things today that had changed everything they believed about the universe. "I will tell them the truth," said finally. "I will tell them that humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy, that your weapons are terrible, that your warriors are unstoppable, that you fight like the Death World creatures you are." Admiral nodded slowly. He had expected this. "But I will also tell them something else," continued. "I will tell them that you came when no one else would, that you bled for strangers, that you died for people you had never met, that when the galaxy abandoned the answered their call." His feathers were no longer trembling. For the first time since the battle began, the small alien stood tall. "I will tell them that humanity is not a threat to fear. You are protectors to befriend, and any species that asks for your help will find you at their side, no matter the cost." Admiral smiled, the first real smile he had allowed himself all day. "That is very kind, Liaison." "It is not kindness, Admiral, it is the truth." The news spread across the galaxy like fire. The broadcast their gratitude on every frequency, their musical voices singing praises of the humans who had saved them. Other species heard the story and wondered if it was real. Could there truly be people who fought and died for nothing but the chance to protect others? On distant worlds, civilizations that had given up hope began to reconsider. They remembered the distress signals they had sent years ago, the calls for help that had gone unanswered. They remembered the despair of believing they were alone in a cold and uncaring universe. And now they knew the truth. They were not alone. There were protectors among the stars, terrifying, beautiful, impossible protectors who came from a world of death and chose to bring life. In the months that followed, Earth received thousands of new messages. Some were thank you notes from species who had heard the story. Some were requests for alliance. Some were simply single sentences, repeated over and over. "Thank you for being who you are." Admiral Ho retired 6 months after the Battle of Prime. He went home to Korea and built a small house by the sea. Every morning, he walked on the beach and thought about the people he had lost and the people he had saved. Chief Engineer Dongjun's daughter named her baby Dongjun, as he had asked. The child grew up knowing that her grandfather was a hero who had given everything so that strangers could live. Sergeant Major Young kept the memory crystal from the child. He played it sometimes, listening to 10,000 years of songs from a species he had never heard of before that day. And every time he listened, he remembered why humans fought. Not for power, not for glory, not for revenge. For hope. And somewhere in the dark between stars, new distress signals were being sent. New voices crying for help in the endless night. New innocents praying for someone to answer. The humans were listening. And they would come.